Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to provide context in the war in Ukraine. Today, we see the highest daily casualty rate of the entire war. So, 2,200 Russian casualties day over day, 8 tanks, 24 armored fighting vehicles, 42 artillery systems, 115 vehicles and fuel tanks. So, if we look at this, even though the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense put this out with 2,200, the highest daily number of Russian personnel losses since the war began. So that's saying something fairly significant. If we look at it, just the totals, here is that November, the average was 1524. By the way, somebody commented, and I want to thank them. I can't remember who it was, for saying, hey, why don't you put a running total here? So the running total for the month, the average is 1,500 as an average for the month. And that was because there was a couple days of 1070 and 1040 and 1280 that were kind of low, but that 2,200 has made it go back up. Okay, so that's where we are right now, 2,200. That's amazing. And yeah, the battlefield just hot, and Russia has no plans to let up as long as they can fight. Okay, Andrew Perpetua's list, it's about maybe two and a half, a little less than 2.5 to 1 of vehicle losses to Russian losses here. Now, last night there was a big bombardment. It was a number of drones and Iskander ballistic missiles. So 5 out of 6 Iskander ballistic missiles and 0 out of 1 cruise missile were shot down. But it's a little deceptive because even if the ballistic missile was shot down, it still did damage where it hit because the pieces of it were still hitting somewhere. Ballistic missiles are different than cruise missiles. Cruise missiles go kind of horizontal. Ballistic missiles go way up and then they go straight down. And when they're coming down, even if you shoot them down, they could still do some significant damage, and it appears that they have. 40 out of 65 Shahed drones were hit, and another 20 Shaheds were suppressed by electronic warfare. So let's look at some of the damage from last night. So let's look first at Kherson. Russia attacked Kherson, targeting residential areas and critical infrastructure with all available weapons. 10 people were injured, 2 people killed. Citizens sustained explosive injuries and injuries to their arms, legs, heads. The regional of the military administration reported, and it just was some significant damage there. And again, they're targeting civilian population. There's no military purpose here, and that's what we have to wrap our minds around. Like, they'll just keep doing this. Russian ballistic missile attack in Kryvyi Rih last night. 6 people were injured, including 15-year-old girl, 3 men aged 38, 49, and 75, and 2 women aged 30 and 82. The Military Regional Administration reported. The missile partially destroyed a 2-story residential building. Rescuers managed to rescue a 38-year-old man and a 15-year-old girl from the rubble. So, yeah, it just keeps coming. And then when we look at Kyiv, among the buildings damaged this morning in a Russian missile attack in Kyiv were a 125-year-old St. Nicholas Catholic Church. Beautiful stained glass that adorned the cathedral has been destroyed, so you see all the holes punctured through it. Okay, getting ready for Christmas. Ukraine's Orthodox Church switched to 25 December for Christmas as opposed to the January date that was traditional to Orthodox. That's more aligning with the Western date of celebration of Christmas. Okay, Ukrainian Foreign Ministry showed photos of foreign embassies damaged after the strike on Kyiv. So, attacking a foreign embassy, that's actually the sovereign property of that country. So, really, Albania, Argentina, Palestine, North Macedonia, Portugal, and Montenegro should be pretty upset about this because this was an international incident. Essentially, Russia attacked them. That's what that amounts to, but it'll go nowhere. It'll be glossed over, and more bad behavior will come. 4 days before Christmas, that's actually 5 days before Christmas, technically, but Russia launched 8 missiles at civilians in Kyiv. 1 person died and the number of injured rose to 12 people. So you see something off in the distance, framed by the Christmas tree and the window. And that actually is right there a metaphor for all that's wrong with this war, is that this is what the Russian world is trying to bring to Ukraine. Russia says morning strike on Kyiv was a response to an attack on a chemical plant in Rostov region. Russia's defense ministry says that the December 20th morning shelling of Kyiv was a response to the December 18th attack on Ukrainian ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles on the Kremnitsk chemical plant in Rostov, except that what the Ukrainians were targeting was a chemical plant in Rostov, and what the Russians were targeting was civilian population in Kyiv. Now, they're going to argue that no, that's not what it was. They're going to argue that it was, according to the Russian military, the strike targeted the SBU command center and a Patriot system position, but you can see with your own eyes what was actually hit. Now, another French scout missile hit a plant in Rostov region for the first time. The successful hit on a petroleum products plant in the Rostov region of the Russian Federation on the day before was carried out by this scout missile with a range of 300 kilometers. So you can see what that scout missile looks like. In Donetsk, an attack on the building of the so-called Ministry of the State Security of the DPR was carried out, and this was reported by local media. There were at least 6 explosions within the city. Okay, this goes back a few days. This goes back to December 12th. It wasn't reported until, or I didn't report it at least until now, and the reports just surfaced as far as I understand. A Russian military transport AN-72 exploded at the Ostafyevo airfield near Moscow, causing $4.5 million in damage. Ukrainian intelligence reported this. The blast occurred 620 miles from the Ukrainian border on December 12th. Now, just like the general that was eliminated in Moscow, Russians have a hard time processing the idea that the war can actually come to them. They're engaged in the war in Ukraine, but that's, in Ukraine. But if it comes to Moscow, they're livid. How could you possibly do that? Aren't you civilized? And as they ask that, they never think about how they treat civilians in Kyiv and Kherson and Kryvyi Rih. I saw this article in Radio Free Europe, and it was interesting. Russia's capture of Bakhmut did not translate into significant advance deeper into Donetsk. Will the possible capture of Pokrovsk be different? Now, as we look at the article, we see this. Now reportedly, just a few kilometers from the edge of town, Russian troops could be on the verge of taking Pokrovsk, a key logistical hub near the current front line. Now, they're less than 3 kilometers at least, and once you get within about 10 kilometers, you're within drone attack range, and so it's pretty bad in Pokrovsk. It would be a substantial blow to the Ukrainians, and I'm not sure that it's one that they can stop from happening, says David Silby, a professor of military history at Cornell University in the U.S. If they lose it, they lose that kind of fairly straightforward access to their defensive lines, and that makes it much harder to build up forces there and keep fighting, he said. Pokrovsk is strategically significant because it serves as a major transportation hub, is close to the front lines, and serves as a supply hub for military operations in the Donbass region. Well, I'm not sure it's strategic in the sense that if you take this, the game's over, but it is tactically a significant thing, and it's bad to lose Pokrovsk, but it may very well happen in time. The rate of Russia's territorial gain in Donetsk has been increasing every month since August, despite a surge in Western military aid. The loss of Pokrovsk would further open a door to one of Russia's major war aims, which is the capturing of the rest of the Donetsk region. Yeah, now if you look at a map, what you'll see is that there's just a little bit of Luhansk that is under Ukrainian control, like 1 or 2%. But the Russians don't actually control 25% of Donetsk, 25% of Zaporizhia, and 25% of Kherson. And yet they claim that they own the whole thing, that they've annexed it legally with their fraudulent elections. Russian President Vladimir Putin said in June that he would agree to a ceasefire and peace talks only if Ukraine withdrew from those 4 regions. That's a non-starter. So Russia lost more than 500 tanks, 1,000 fighting vehicles, enough hardware to equip 5 mechanized divisions during the year-long 45-kilometer march westward toward Pokrovsk. So they've been at this for almost a year, and again, they've lost the equivalent of 5 mechanized divisions trying to take Pokrovsk. So while they may take it in time, it's going to be a very costly win. Now, according to George Barros, an analyst for the ISW, if the Russians do seize Pokrovsk, The current campaign will likely culminate due to force and resource constraints. They just don't have enough to keep going and press that advantage at this time. If the Ukrainians are properly resourced and they can get more men to the front that are well equipped, this would actually be an ideal time to counterattack into a tired and exhausted adversary and inflict some reverses on the Russians, he said. Of course, both sides are very tired right now and very worn down. Russia now no longer has an advantage in firepower and unmanned aerial vehicles, as the U.S. rushes ammunition to the country and Ukraine cranks up drone production. So that's where they are with Pokrovsk. I don't know what will happen long term, but there's this last little line that I want to read, and it's really interesting. Russia is winning, but this is destroying them as a military power. And I think that's a fair assessment. They are winning in the sense of taking ground incrementally, but at a tremendous cost, and that's degrading their ability to fight. Let's look at the front line, courtesy of Michael McKay. Zaporizhzhia region, 1 attempt to advance. In the Kherson region, 2 enemy assaults failed. In the Seversk direction, Ukrainian defenders repelled 9 attacks. In the Kupiansk direction, invaders attacked Ukrainian defenders 10 times. On the Bakhmut front, 1 attempt. Defenders held back 12 assaults on Pokrovsk as well. In the Lyman direction, there were 17 attacks. Kharkiv direction, 18 attacks on Ukrainian positions. Ramika direction, 20 attacks. And of course, Pokrovsk is going to be the heaviest with 32 offensive actions over the course of the day. Just a few more things. Now, you know that the war is a hot war and an informational war and a political war, and it's also a cyber war. And there was a large cyber attack that disrupted Ukraine's digital government services. Russian hackers claim to have deleted over 1 billion rows of data from Ukraine's government databases, including backup copies stored in Poland. Well, that's what they're claiming, and it looks like something actually has happened here. Ukraine's state registries are hit by a largest cyber attack to date, according to the Deputy Prime Minister. According to her, restoring the most crucial sectors will take up to 2 weeks, and priority is going to be given to the registries of civil status records and legal entities and individual entrepreneurs. And again, this is a hybrid war. It's not just hot on the ground, but it's hot in social media and cyber and political and everywhere else as well. 2 quick comments by Sergey Suen. He's the founder of the European Resilience Center, and he said 2 things that they just deserve to be highlighted. Today's UN would have blamed both Warsaw's uprising and Warsaw's ghetto uprising as dangerous escalations and called for respect toward the Third Reich's security interests. Wow, what a powerful statement. And then this statement just hit me between the eyes. Russians using chemical warfare on a daily basis in their genocidal war of aggression, and nobody cares. Ukrainians eliminate a Russian chemical forces commander, and the West talks about escalation. Like, what's wrong with us? The escalation was what the chemical forces commander was doing. That's the escalation. Now, as I close, I want to draw a point out of what you're about to see here. This is a Rube Goldberg contraption. It's one of those things where a marble gets rolled and it hits this and it bounces off that and the next thing. And this one was done to the tune of Mission Impossible. And it's really interesting just seeing the marble bounce and hit things and that sort of thing. Okay, so that's a Rube Goldberg machine done very well. So I showed you that to show you this. This is a Rube Goldberg contraption that doesn't work out very well. And it's a metaphor for everything that's going on in the war, both for the Russians on the ground and for the Western response. Politically, we just can't seem to get it together. So if you're watching this, you're seeing everything that's happening. You're just listening on Spotify. This guy's just trying to chase the ball around and push the ball into a stick so the stick can hit something else and it can bounce into something else, and it just has to keep moving it with his hands. And it's just, that's not how this is supposed to work. But again, it's like the metaphor alert is screaming at me while I'm watching this. But everything's going according to plan. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you for your time. Like, to subscribe. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about you.